I wake up every morning knowing I destroyed 3 lives with one word. And the worst part is, I'd say it again. My name is Margaret. I'm 66 years old, and for 43 years I kept a secret so dangerous that when it finally escaped my lips, it didn't just shatter my family, it erased everything I'd built. Every memory, every holiday, every photograph suddenly meant something different. Something darker. But I need you to understand something before I go any further. I need you to stay with me. Because what I'm about to tell you, what happened in the weeks after that word slipped out, it's still happening. Right now. As I'm recording this. Let me take you back to where it started. Not to the word itself, not yet. But to the life I had before everything turned to ash. My husband Robert and I had what everyone called a picture-perfect marriage. We met in college, married at 23, had our daughter Sarah 2 years later. Robert worked as an architect, I taught elementary school. We had a modest house in suburban Connecticut, a golden retriever named Biscuit, Sunday dinners that smelled like rosemary and garlic. Sarah grew up, got married, gave us 2 beautiful grandchildren. Emily is 7 now, Jack is 5. Every Thursday, I'd drive to Sarah's house and watch the kids while she worked her nursing shift. I'd make them cookies, read them stories, tuck them into the same worn quilts I'd used for Sarah decades ago. They called me Mimi. Robert was Papa Rob. We were the kind of grandparents you see in commercials. But underneath all of that, underneath 43 years of breakfast conversations and shared blankets and holding hands at funerals, there was a name I never said out loud. Daniel. When I met Robert in that college library, I was already in love with someone else. Daniel was my best friend's older brother. He was 25, finishing law school, and he had this way of looking at you like you were the only person who'd ever said anything worth hearing. We'd started seeing each other in secret that summer before college. My best friend Catherine didn't know. His parents didn't know. We'd meet at this little diner 30 miles outside of town, sit in the back booth, and talk about the lives we'd build together. He was going to finish law school. I was going to get my teaching degree. We'd get married, move to Boston, have 3 kids and a house with a blue door. Then one night in August, 3 weeks before I left for college, Daniel told me we needed to talk. I should have known by the way he couldn't meet my eyes, but I didn't. I sat across from him in that booth, smiling like an idiot, thinking maybe he was going to propose early. Instead, he told me he'd been accepted to a firm in Seattle. He was leaving in 2 weeks. He said long distance wouldn't work. He said we were too young. He said I'd understand someday. I didn't cry in front of him. I waited until I got home, locked myself in my childhood bedroom, and sobbed into my pillow until my throat burned. The next day, I went to college orientation and met Robert. Now here's what I need you to understand. I didn't settle for Robert. I genuinely loved him. He was kind and steady, and he made me laugh. When he proposed 2 years later, I said yes without hesitation. When Sarah was born, when I held her for the first time, and Robert kissed my forehead and whispered that we'd made something perfect together, I meant it when I said I'd never been happier. But Daniel never completely left my mind. I didn't Facebook stalk him. I didn't Google him. I didn't drive by his parents' house when I visited Catherine. I locked him away in a part of my brain I rarely accessed, like a photograph you keep in a drawer but never look at, until 3 months ago. Catherine called me out of nowhere. We'd stayed friends over the years but had drifted, the way people do. She was calling because her mother had passed away and the funeral was that weekend. I went. Robert came with me. We sat in the church and listened to the pastor talk about a woman I'd once considered a second mother. And then afterward, at the reception, I saw him. Daniel. He was standing by the coffee table, older, obviously, gray at the temples, but with those same eyes, those same hands. He was talking to someone I didn't recognize and laughing at something they'd said. My chest tightened. My hands went cold. Robert was across the room talking to Catherine's cousin. I could have walked away. I should have walked away. Instead, I walked toward him. When he saw me, his face went through about 6 different emotions in 2 seconds. Surprise, recognition. Something else I couldn't name. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. Surface stuff. His life in Seattle. His career. His wife Diane, who'd passed away from cancer 4 years ago. My life in Connecticut, my daughter, my grandkids, Robert. It was polite, distant, appropriate. But when we said goodbye and he put his hand on my shoulder for just a second too long, something cracked open inside me that I'd kept sealed for over 4 decades. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. Robert snored softly beside me, and I stared at the ceiling and thought about Daniel's hand on my shoulder. About the way he'd looked at me. About the life I might have had if he'd asked me to come to Seattle with him instead of ending things in that diner. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I looked him up on Facebook. He'd sent me a friend request overnight. I stared at that little notification for 20 minutes. My finger hovered over the accept button. This is stupid, I told myself. You're 66 years old. You have a husband, a family. You're being ridiculous. I accepted it. We started messaging. Just small things at first. A memory from that summer. A joke about Catherine's mom's terrible casseroles. But then the messages got longer, more frequent. We started talking about things we'd never talked about when we were young. Our regrets, our fears. The moments in our lives where we wondered if we'd made the wrong choice. He told me he'd thought about me constantly that first year in Seattle, that he'd almost called me a dozen times, that breaking up with me was the hardest thing he'd ever done, but he'd thought it was the right choice because he didn't want to hold me back. I told him I'd named my daughter Sarah because it was his mother's middle name. We started video calling, late at night after Robert went to bed. I'd sit in the guest room with my laptop and talk to Daniel for hours. About everything, about nothing. About the strange grief of being in your 60s and realizing how much time you've lost. I wasn't physical with him, not even close, but emotionally. I was having an affair, and I knew it. God, I knew it. But I couldn't stop. Then 6 weeks ago, Daniel told me he was coming back east for a legal conference in Manhattan. He'd be there for 3 days. He asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. I told Robert I was going into the city to visit an old college friend. He didn't question it. Why would he? In 43 years of marriage, I'd never given him a reason not to trust me. I met Daniel at a cafe in Midtown on a Tuesday afternoon. We sat across from each other and talked for 4 hours. He told me he'd been thinking about me constantly since the funeral, that seeing me again had reminded him of who he used to be, who he wanted to be. I told him the same thing. When we left the cafe, we walked through Central Park. It was October. The leaves were changing, and everything felt surreal, like I'd stepped into a memory I didn't know I had. At some point, he took my hand. I didn't pull away. We didn't kiss. We didn't go to a hotel. We just walked. But holding his hand felt more intimate than anything I'd done with Robert in years. When I got home that night, Robert asked how my friend was. I said she was great. We'd had a wonderful time catching up. He believed me. 2 weeks later, Sarah called and asked if I could watch the kids on Thursday because she'd picked up an extra shift. Of course, I said. I always said yes. I drove to her house, made Emily and Jack grilled cheese, watched them play in the backyard. Emily was pretending to be a veterinarian. Jack was the injured puppy. They were so innocent, so completely untouched by the kinds of compromises and betrayals adults make. While they played, my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. I can't stop thinking about you. I stared at that message for a long time. I should have deleted it. I should have blocked his number. I should have told him this needed to stop. Instead, I wrote back. Me neither. That night, after I'd gone home, after Robert and I had eaten dinner and watched Jeopardy and brushed our teeth side by side like we'd done for over 4 decades, I lay in bed and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Alive. And that terrified me. Because I knew what it meant. I knew where this was going. And I knew I didn't want to stop it. The next day, I told Robert I was thinking about taking a weekend trip to visit my cousin in Boston. She'd been asking me to come for months, I said. It would be nice to get away. He thought it was a great idea. Told me I deserved a break. I booked a hotel room in Boston. Then I texted Daniel and told him I'd be there that weekend. He said he'd drive down from where he was visiting friends in Maine. I'm not going to describe that weekend in detail. Not because I'm ashamed, though I am, but because the physical part of it wasn't what broke me. It was lying in a hotel room on a Saturday morning, watching Daniel sleep and realizing I felt more myself with him than I had in my entire marriage. When I got home Sunday night, Robert was making dinner. He'd picked up my favorite wine, made pasta from scratch, set the table with candles. "I missed you," he said, kissing my cheek. I smiled and told him I'd missed him too. That's when it started. The double life. For the next month, I lived two separate existences. There was Margaret, who had coffee with her book club, who watched her grandkids on Thursdays, who held Robert's hand during church service. And there was the other Margaret, the one who texted Daniel constantly, who made up excuses to drive to the city, who started wearing perfume she hadn't worn in 20 years. I told myself I could manage both, that I could keep them separate, that no one would get hurt if I was careful. Then Thanksgiving happened. Sarah invited us over for dinner. She'd also invited Robert's brother and his family. 12 people around the table, passing dishes, laughing at Jack's impression of his kindergarten teacher. At some point, Sarah asked if I was feeling okay. I'd been quiet, she said, distracted. I told her I was fine, just tired. But I wasn't fine. Because my phone was in my purse and my purse was on the kitchen counter. And Daniel had been texting me all day. After dinner, while everyone was in the living room, I snuck into the kitchen to check my messages. Emily followed me. "Mimi, can I have more pie?" I shoved my phone in my pocket. "Of course, sweetie." But I'd left it unlocked. And when I pulled it out of my pocket a few seconds later to check the time, it was open to Daniel's messages. Emily didn't see. She was already running back to the living room with her pie. But Sarah did. She'd come into the kitchen to refill her wine glass, and she was standing right behind me. I don't know how much she saw. I don't know if she actually read the messages or if she just saw a man's name and some text that clearly wasn't professional. But when I turned around and saw her face, I knew. She didn't say anything. Not then. She just stared at me for a few seconds, then walked back to the living room. My hands shook for the rest of the night. On the drive home, Robert talked about how nice dinner had been, how lucky we were to have such a wonderful family. I nodded and said yes and felt like I was going to vomit. Sarah didn't call me the next day, or the day after that. On Wednesday, I texted her asking if everything was okay. She didn't respond. Thursday came, my day to watch the kids. I drove to her house at the usual time. She opened the door but didn't invite me in. "I've got it covered today," she said. Her voice was flat, cold. "Oh, did you take the day off?" "No, I called in a sitter." We stared at each other. "Sarah, I don't want to talk about it right now, Mom." She closed the door. I stood on her porch for a full minute, then walked back to my car and sat in the driveway trying to figure out what to do. I could come clean, tell her everything, beg for forgiveness. Or I could lie. Tell her it was a misunderstanding, that Daniel was just an old friend. I chose the latter. I texted her a long message explaining that Daniel was Catherine's brother, that we'd reconnected after the funeral, that it was entirely innocent. She didn't respond. That night, Robert got a call from Sarah's husband, Mike. I only heard Robert's side of the conversation, but it was enough. "What? No, that's not possible." Silence. "Mike, I don't know what you're talking about." More silence. "Let me talk to her. Let me talk to Sarah." But she wouldn't talk to him. When Robert hung up, his face was gray. "Mike says Sarah thinks you're having an affair." The word hung in the air between us. I could have denied it. I could have acted shocked, outraged. How dare she accuse me of such a thing? But I didn't. Because I was so tired. So tired of lying, of living two lives, of being two different people. So instead, I said one word. The word that brought my entire past back. The word that destroyed everything. Daniel. Robert just stared at me. "What?" "His name is Daniel." I watched my husband's face crumble in real time, watched 43 years of trust evaporate. "How long?" I told him everything. The funeral, the messages, the weekend in Boston, the month of lying. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He just sat down on the couch and put his head in his hands. "I need you to leave," he said quietly. "Robert, I need you to leave right now." I packed a bag, got in my car, drove to a hotel. That was 5 weeks ago. Since then, Sarah won't speak to me. Mike won't let me see the kids. Robert filed for divorce. He's living in the house. I'm in a rental apartment that smells like someone else's life. My book club stopped calling. My friends from church stopped texting. Catherine, when she found out I'd been seeing Daniel, told me I'd betrayed her entire family. Daniel called me 3 days after everything exploded, asked if I was okay, if there was anything he could do. I told him not to contact me again. Because here's what I realized, sitting in that hotel room the first night after Robert kicked me out. I didn't leave my marriage for Daniel. I didn't blow up my entire life because I was madly in love and couldn't help myself. I did it because I was a coward. I did it because it was easier to chase some fantasy version of my youth than to face the fact that my real life, my actual marriage, had become something I didn't recognize, something comfortable but hollow. Robert and I had stopped really talking years ago. We went through motions. We were kind to each other, but we weren't connected. Not really. And instead of doing the hard work of fixing that, instead of going to counseling or having difficult conversations, I found someone who made me feel special again, and I used that as an escape. I destroyed my family because I was selfish and scared and weak. And the worst part? If I'm being completely honest, if that word hadn't slipped out that night, if Sarah hadn't seen those messages, if I'd been more careful, I would have kept going. I would have kept lying. I would have kept living that double life until it killed me or someone found out. I can't take it back. I can't undo what I've done. Sarah sent me an email last week. Just one line. I don't know who you are anymore. Neither do I, sweetheart. Neither do I. Robert's lawyer sent over the divorce papers yesterday. I'm going to sign them. There's no point fighting. I don't deserve to. The house will sell. We'll split everything down the middle. 43 years reduced to spreadsheets and signatures. I called Daniel one more time, 2 days ago. Not because I wanted to restart anything, but because I needed to tell him something. That summer, and I said, when you broke up with me, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd never feel whole again. Margaret, but I did. I built a whole life. A good life. And I just threw it away chasing a memory of who we used to be. He was quiet for a long time. I'm sorry, he finally said. Me too. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if Sarah will ever forgive me. I don't know if Emily and Jack will remember their Mimi in 10 years, or if I'll just be a strange gap in their childhood. I don't know if Robert, when he's 90 and looking back on his life, will remember anything about our marriage except how it ended. What I do know is this. One word brought my entire past back. But it wasn't the past that destroyed me. It was the choice I made in the present. The choice to betray everyone who trusted me because I was too afraid to face who I'd become. So here's my question for you. Because I genuinely don't know the answer. Can you come back from something like this? Can you rebuild when you've burned everything down? Or is this just who I am now? The woman who destroyed her family at 66 because she was too weak to do the hard work of being honest? Leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Because I'm still here, still living with what I did, and I don't know how to move forward. And if you stayed until the end, if you listened to this whole mess, thank you. Subscribe if you want to follow what happens next, because this isn't over. Sarah sent another email this morning. I haven't opened it yet. I'm afraid of what it might say. But I'm going to read it tonight, and whatever it says, whatever happens next, I'll tell you. Because maybe that's all I can do now. Tell the truth. Finally. Even if it's too late. Even if it costs me everything I have left.